Hey everyone, I hope you'll enjoy this video of me showing you how to make a pair of these 16 gauge mild steel gauntlets. Now, I had hoped to make these battle ready, and I have a lot of confidence in them. I just don't feel that I'm personally qualified to judge whether or not a piece of armour is battle ready or not. If you were thinking about making this for a particular fight group or reenactment group, first off, these are not period or purely historically accurate. There are elements of historical gauntlet designs in them, but this is a mongrel design really, and while it is 16 gauge mild steel, there can be issues with some designs with levels of angle. When you articulate, you can get protrude, plates can stick out a bit, and that can catch a blade, can be an issue. So if you were planning on making these for a medieval fight group, I would recommend you talk with your marshal or whoever oversees the armour to make sure that it is safe for that particular group, and ask them about it. They may want you to use thicker steel, a different grade of steel. They might not allow it because it's not a historical piece, or they may require that you build in a lot more padding. So yeah, obviously for legal reasons I cannot personally guarantee these as battle ready, but for my purposes, which is making myself a bit harder for a zombie to chop, they should do fine, because, well, I can't shoot through 16 gauge mild steel, so my hope is a zombie probably might not be able to either. Here are my finger gauntlets. They articulate quite nicely. They're not actually complete for this video. Do need to add an extra steel plate as wide as that steel plate there, go around and close it up with a strap so I can actually keep them attached to the wrist. I just wanted to get this done so I can get this video done, because I've been working on these for I think at least 3 months. So if you can share this on social media, leave a like and comment, possibly subscribe, I would very much appreciate that, because this has been a lot of work getting to this point. They articulate very nicely, depending on how well you do the rivets and articulation points. See, this piece articulates better than this piece. I kinda made these pieces a bit too tight, so they don't articulate as well as this one does. So the end result can vary depending on how well you make it. But the important thing is that I can hold a sword very nicely. Have full flexibility in them to use a sword. So that's really all I really need. And before anyone asks, yes, this is a katana with an edged blade and a crossguard. And in case you're wondering, yes, it's a custom job, and I have videos showing you how to do it on this channel as well. Now, for legal reasons, I cannot guarantee that your recreation of these gauntlets would be battle ready for any kind of armed combat or training combat with weapons. And another thing, just because something is considered battle ready doesn't mean that you are impervious. These are not indestructible. They have limitations. If a strike comes in and it catches on one of those plates where it articulates, if there's enough force there, it can rip it off. And if it's going in on an angle, possibly go straight into your finger. And I have met people who have lost fingers doing sparring with steel, supposedly battle-ready gauntlets against people with blunt training swords, and they've still ended up losing fingers. So don't be stupid with these. And of course, these have almost no shock absorption because I ended up not putting extra padding on them. So if you took a heavy shot against these, the actual transfer energy from the shot could damage bones. So I don't want, so use some sense with these. These do not make you invulnerable. They just make it a lot harder for things to cut you. Harder, not impossible. Now I just gotta put this warning out there because there's probably a few stupid people out there. I mean, it's the internet. If you spend enough time on the internet, you realize there are a lot of stupid people browsing the internet. So just a warning, if you decide to put on a pair of these do not make you indestructible. So if you make a pair of these, there is still the possibility of injury if they get hit hard enough. So I have here all of the pieces to make this gauntlet as it is right now. It still requires a piece to help lock it to your wrist, but I'll do that after I've finished shaping it out, just so that I make sure that I have the width correct with it. Now, I'll leave a link in the description to take you to a template so you can download it, print it out, and cut out all these pieces. But I would recommend that you at least first try it with cardboard and make the gauntlet out of cardboard to make sure it fits. But even better than that is PVC. If you get some 2mm thick PVC in a large pipe, a wide diameter pipe, cut it down one side, flatten it out with a heat gun, mark out the pattern, cut it out, then shape it with the heat gun again and make the gauntlet out of PVC. That will help you find out if you need to change any of the dimensions of the plates for the gauntlet. So if you're just doing something as a costume and it doesn't need to be battle ready, then PVC would probably be alright. Now, another thing you need to consider is, other than differences in our sizes of hands, this template is sized to match my hand. You will need to match the sizes of the plates in your gauntlet to fit your hand, but also the type of glove you're going to be using. I just used a thin leather glove. This is to give me lots of dexterity and allow me to feel the sword that I'm holding on to. I could have gone with thicker, but that would have limited my ability to feel the sword I'm holding and affect how well I can control edge alignment just through touch and feeling. Now, if you want more padding than a thin leather glove, you can attach extra padding to the back of the hand. You could add extra layers of leather, layers of linen. You may even be able to just use some clothes cell foam, or a combination of those. Perhaps 2 layers of linen with a layer of thin clothes cell foam in between them, but you will then have to adjust the size of the plates to incorporate the different dimensions given by the padding. Now, because this has not got a padded wrist, I don't think this is SCA legal as it stands like this, even though it is 1.6mm or 16 gauge thick mild steel. I think for medieval combat groups such as the SCA, a lot of those groups will have rules and regulations on what is the minimum allowable amount of protection you can have. So that you will probably want to check with your local fight group first to find out how much padding you need, how thick you need the metal, and of course, key thing you need to mention is what type of material you're making out of. There's a big difference between well-tempered high carbon steel and untempered mild steel. It's quite a noticeable difference. Of course, this doesn't spring. It's mild steel. It's only annealed. It may have some work hardening, but it's not tempered. Unless you're going to go through and actually temper this yourself. However, tempering of armor is not going to be covered in this tutorial. Right, so after we've cut all of these pieces out, what I used was a jigsaw. Be warned, you will probably want some thick gloves when jigsawing just because of the vibrations that come up through your arm, as well as you'll probably want gloves and long sleeves, as well as eye and ear protection. Because when you're sawing into this steel, little sharp pieces of burning hot metal fly everywhere. For my strapping, I'm using rawhide, which I do not believe is historically accurate. But then again, this particular pattern, while it is heavily influenced by historical pieces, is not a copy of any particular historical design. I'm using rawhide in place of leather. But the reason for this is, well, mainly cost. This was a rawhide dog chew that I soaked in water, flattened out and left to dry. And rawhide is a lot tougher than leather, which is why it was used on shields, though it means I have to use small strips of it. It's about 1 millimeter thick. I don't want to go too much thicker because it does kind of resist flexing. It doesn't really want to bend. It's a bit more usable when you cut it into thinner pieces to run along the back of your finger, but as of yet I have not seen any references to people using rawhide for late medieval plate armor strapping. I've seen it used as the actual armor plates in some forms of lamellar armor, including early Japanese armor, but it's not really historical to be using rawhide. I just did it because it was a lot cheaper and easier to get a hold of. So what I need to do now is I need to shape these finger pieces over a vise. Now, if you wanted to polish up your armor to make it really shiny in the end result, now would probably be a good time when all the pieces are nice and flat and easy to work with. If you want to get nice and shiny and polished, go for it now. Right, so we've marked out all of our finger plates as to what exactly each plate is. So let's just get out all the ones with the index finger. We need to make sure we can't be bending them the right way. So that's the right way. That's on pipe. Now, for this, I use the same pipe to shape each piece for every finger. That's not the best way of doing it, because obviously my index and my pinky have different diameters. So if you want to make this even better, you could use different diameter rods or pipes for each finger. But I did it just using one for simplicity, and because, well, kind of didn't realize it was going to be that big of an issue. I mean, it still works, but you could make it better by having each finger sized individually. So, held it on with a piece of tape. This vise originally has teeth on the inside for grip. That's not good for armor because it leaves tons of marks on it, so I've shaped out this mild steel plate that just goes on that side to protect it. So, matter of placing this in the vise, using it. For the larger pieces, I like to shape it using the rubber mallet that doesn't leave scratches. But because there's such a small area, you don't risk it with this tiny hammer. On one side, you'll flip it over. Do the other. Now, when you do this, you may notice that a steel hammer leaves more tool marks than your rubber mallet. So there are little dents along the edge there. So we've done the top piece that goes up to the knuckle. Then we want to do the, if that's the first, we want to then do the third one, because the knuckle piece will right over the top of them. So we get this piece that's got the 45-degree angles cut into it. Straighten that one around the pipe as well. Now, there are videos on YouTube and across the internet showing you making some kind of jig out of 2 bits of pipe. I tried that. It doesn't really work very well on thick pieces of metal. That's really only for really thin pieces of metal, and even if you do it that way, you still need to shape it with a hammer afterwards anyway, so it doesn't really work on thick pieces of metal and kind of seems pointless when you've got to resort to shaping it with a hammer afterwards anyway. So no, before I get any comments on that, no, I'm not going to do it that way. Seems more like a waste of time. Okay, so now I've got that piece, and we want them both on here. And then one more sticky tape, knuckle piece, into that. And that gives us the knuckle piece. Roughly. Gonna need a little bit more shaping. It's a little bit off. Yeah, it's a little uneven. I need to widen it a little. Now, to widen it, I just basically yeah, you probably want to wear eye protection for this. We don't want it too tight because we want it to be able to move over the top. So it's going to be riveted to a rawhide strap. We need it to be able to turn inside of it, which is kind of why these cutouts are there, because here needs to turn even further. So those little cutouts help it go in a bit easier. So now we just need to do the fingertip. For the fingertip, we take the third piece and the flatter section that's going to be facing it. We've got to have some overlap. We want it to be fitted to the third piece on the small amount of overlap. I give it about half a centimetre, just to give a bit of extra room for moving. It won't be overlapping that far when we finally rivet it on. I just like to have that extra bit of room to allow it to bend easily. So we want it to be fitted around the third piece there, but also to be the same diameter as the pipe, so it kind of comes in like a cone. So we've done that side, we're just going to do the other side to it, and there we go. Now it's just a matter of doing that to the other 4 fingers, and then I'll spray paint the inside of them leave the inside of them to dry. Then we'll move on to drilling out the holes and riveting them to a rawhide strap. Now on to attaching our finger plates to the strap. Now, normally you'd want to use leather, but I'm using rawhide because it's easier for me to get a hold of and it's cheaper for me to get a hold of. Now, you might be able to get away with using a nice wide strap like that for leather, but because this is rawhide, it's a bit tougher, so we have to thin it down a bit more. But it needs to be wide enough to have the two rivets on the knuckle. And some of you are probably thinking, why not just rivet it straight to the glove? I really do not recommend that. Firstly, you can poison yourself with galvanization or rust or other types of rivets contacting your skin. Apparently, not 100% sure about that, but I have heard that you can poison yourself that way. Of course, you are putting your hand into this glove. There's probably a nice tight fit, so if those rivets are sticking out a little bit, you can gouge chunks of skin off your hand, which doesn't sound very pleasant. But really the biggest thing is, if the rivet goes straight through the glove and is resting right on your skin, then there is zero shock absorption. If you want this for combat, you probably want some kind of shock absorption for this. So if you've got some nice thick glove, this is a welding glove for example. I didn't end up going with these because they've got too much padding on the inside. You can't really feel what you're holding onto too well. But you can have lots of padding on the back of your glove and have your strap riveted to the plates, and then have the strap stitched to the back of the glove so that there's padding there. So we've got two holes marked out on the knuckle piece, and they're about 2 centimeters apart, and he'll drill them in. Okay, so I've painted these black with just some spray paint. I've marked out where I'm going to drill the holes. I've got my drill bit sized for the size of nails I'm using for rivets. Right, so I've marked out in line with the holes in the middle of the knuckle plate, and I've put on the other two pieces towards the tip, leaving a little bit extra. So I've marked that out. So I'll mark them through the holes and where the edges are, so that I know where I've got to drill out the holes for the next lot. After we've got our nails through, because we know where the holes are, I need to thin down the piece of rawhide. You might not have to do this if you're doing leather, but rawhide it seems to be pretty much necessary because it's a much harder material. That is so that you can more easily fit this next piece down, and so it's not a U shape, because then it would make it harder to bend in that direction. So go cut out like that. You've got to take the ends off of the nails. First we want to make sure they're in as far as they can go. You may want to put them over a pipe and hammer on the back of them, make sure they're in as far as they go. And we want to leave just a tiny bit of the nail left after we pinch off the end. I'm not quite sure. Can't remember what this tool is called, but one of the best ways of doing this I've found. But be warned, when you squeeze off the end, it may go flying. Right, so we've taken them off, we've left a little bit sticking out. That's about a bit over 2 millimeters. Now I've got this large decking nail stuck in a vise. I'm using it like a little anvil, so I can put that over there. I got mushroom the end of this nail out. Well, where eye protection for this. So I've got the holes drilled in the next piece. So wedge it in there and basically repeat that. But one thing, before you rivet on the very tip, you will want to put some little holes through the rawhide. That's so you can run some very strong cordage. I'm using thick waxed cotton upholstery thread. It's stuff for doing leather work with. You could use anything as long as it's nice and tough. And through those 2 holes on the tip, or just before the tip, I take them and I take a needle, stitch them through the very tip of the finger, tie it on tight, and I use a dab of super glue just to make sure that that little knot does not come undone, because it's waxed cotton. It seems to like coming undone, but that's pretty much the process. Okay, so here are the 4 fingers done. Yes, I know some of these seem a bit crooked. I had to re-rivet the end on this finger, which is why it's so badly scratched up. So, just showing you this so you can get a good idea of how the different rivets go together, and have a look at some of the overlap. So, not all that much overlap. Now, one thing I am a little worried about with this design is this knuckle plate. When closed, that does seem to stick out a bit. Maybe I should have moved the very edge of this piece out further so that it wouldn't, so that it would articulate closer to the edge of the knuckle plate, because blade coming up could get caught on that and potentially rip the plate off if it's got enough force behind it, which is not a good thing to happen. I've got my 4 fingers done, and don't worry, I'm going to take the glove off before I start stitching them. What I need to do is I need to stitch these bits of thick waxed cotton thread through the tips of the glove's fingers, right at the very tip. Then work my way back up the glove, and at every knuckle joint, or in line with each one of these plates, for each one of these plates, I'm gonna stitch through the back of the glove, and that bit of thick waxed cotton, I'm gonna bring that up over the plate and get it so it goes down underneath in between the plates. So it'll actually be going around the rawhide strip there. I'll probably drill some more holes to stitch there to the back of the glove. Though in hindsight, this probably would have been a lot better if I had just drilled holes in at all of those points to attached thread like I did right on the actual tip of the finger. But oh well, I don't claim to be an expert on this. I'm just trying to figure it out as I go. But yes, that's definitely room for improvement, would be to drill some holes in and stitch it through that way. Would be very difficult to do it now that I'm at this point, because I'm not sure if I could even thread them without having to remove the rivets. For future reference, next time I try a gauntlet like this, I'm going to drill holes in at each one of those points. Got it tied in there. It's tied up over the... It's tied on the top, but slipped down underneath the plate, and it's tied underneath. I've tied it a few times, and just to make sure that that knot does not come undone while it's inside of the armour and difficult to get to, I'm just gonna give it some super glue just to hold everything together a bit stronger, because that's not a fancy knot. Now I've got my 4 fingers done. I need to do the rider plate that goes over the top and is riveted to the straps. The rider plate is this piece here, and I've marked off where I want to make the bend. A piece of pipe. Line it up. And there's the first bend. Now I have this piece of wood that has a grip on it. Just need to line that up. Put that over there. I grab my little hammer that has this kind of end on it. And I grab my little hammer that has this end on it. And a bigger hammer. And I line up the line where I want to make the groove over this little notch I made in the wood. I made this by basically just pounding this hammer into the wood because it's just pine, it's not tough. And you'll see a crease has started to form. More lighter blows are better than fewer harder ones because you want to deform it evenly. To get that angle right for your gauntlet, you want something that'll match your fist and the contour of your knuckles. In the glove, of course. If you got padding, they'll throw it out a bit. Now, because this is my second one, to make sure that they are even, I can simply have it going the opposite way, place it on there to make sure it has the same angles to it. Now I've just got to do this little extra piece here by rounding it the same way I did the first corner with the pipe in the vise. Rounded it with a rubber mallet. Okay.